All right, let's do
Middle school is just rough.
Good to be back here. Jamie, Michael, and Chris, what's happening? Ready to talk about being dads, being husbands, and being business leaders who just want to thrive in all those areas, but we want to make sure that we focus on our wife, we focus on our family because they come first, and we can still kill it in business too.
Amen.
Poser is one letter away from loser.
Ouch!
Oh.
Are you calling me a loser? Because I'm a poser.
Hey, aren't we all posers at some degree in some areas of life, at stages of life? I mean, think back to even childhood.
I think we can all relate. You guys remember Umbros? They're like those.
Yeah, for the soccer players, right?
Yeah.
I was not a soccer player, but guess what? The kids in our school who were cool were soccer players. Ooh. So I happened to be walking by the Lost and Found one day in my elementary school and saw a pair of Umbros in there. And I actually asked the lady who was watching that area of the office if I could take the Umbros. And she said, well, we got to wait till somebody claims them first so you can come back. So I came back like every day for the next couple of weeks until she finally gave me the Umbros so I could also have Umbros too and be one of the cool kids. And that worked pretty awesome until I got called out for being a poser because I didn't even play soccer.
Oh, man. I used to teach middle school. For me personally, that was the most difficult years in my upbringing. Such a desire to be needed and be cool. And I got made fun of a little bit, which, several years back, I talked to a therapist and I'm over that.
You got made fun of more than now, Jamie?
Totally. Yeah. I feel cool around you guys. Like I don't have to be somebody I'm not.
Yeah. Well, you are cool, Jamie.
Oh, thanks.
In my middle school, it happened to be really cool to love Grateful Dead, the band. I didn't even like the Grateful Dead. I thought they were horrible. But because I wanted to be loved and accepted, I actually studied harder on what Grateful Dead songs were than I did on my actual homework. They had this Grateful Dead hour at night after my bedtime, and I would sneak the radio on so I could listen to the Grateful Dead songs and try to remember which ones they were so I knew what to say when I was around the cool kids in middle school.
I remember that. That was on 97 Rock in Buffalo, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was. And man, I just had such a need to be part of something, like to be accepted, to be liked. Man, I was willing to do anything just to get that acceptance.
Yeah, and fast forward now to adulthood, right? I mean, this happens at every stage of life, but now as men, right? Men, let's be frank, men are posers, right?
Guilty.
Hey, we're here to bust this myth that if I pretend to be successful and act the part, then people will like me. They'll respect me. They'll know that I've got my game together. Like you guys just talked about, we want respect. We want to be liked. We want to be accepted and respected no matter what stage of life or what arena that we're in. But as guys, we have to get over this posing that we do.
Well, I haven't gotten over it yet. So if we have to, I'm going to need some help with that. Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
I don't know if I'm saying this because I'm a little bit older than you, not by like 2 years, but I wouldn't say I've gotten over that, but I feel like in the last couple of years, being a father and dealing with all this stuff with my kids at their age, I want them to not have to try like I did, especially like Diego's 12. He's moving into that middle school age. I've actually felt really good, especially being a part of this podcast with you guys. Like this is a no poser zone, right? Like, isn't that what we actually encourage each other to be real. To me, that is so freeing to just be around a group of guys who you don't have to put that Sunday face on and have it all together because we appreciate each other even if we're struggling with something. Like Michael, you just had a baby and you got 2 kids under the age of 2 in your house. You're going to be a poser every minute if you just walk around with a smile on your face saying, life is easy. This is great.
I am having a difficult time. I said it.
But that's authentic. You're totally true. You're not going to church on Sunday morning. Everyone's looking perfect. You got this big smile on your face. And during the week, you're like, oh my gosh, just another hour I need to live here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael, what's it been like for you in starting your career out? I mean, have you ever felt like I'm kind of acting a part here? Like, will they find out?
So this is like the third poser story I'm telling, right? Like the master poser.
There's more where that came from, right? Just three?
But in the spirit of being authentic, here we go. Yeah, when I started my coaching business, I did not have the training I needed to really deliver the value that I thought I could deliver. I needed more experience. I needed more time to develop myself. And I just couldn't be honest with that because I didn't know how to move forward without feeling confident when I was doing, at least tricking myself into that. And so I positioned myself as someone who had it all together, who was Jamie, remember those success tips that I used to do?
Those were good, man. Give yourself some credit.
Yeah, I mean, I stole them from somebody else. And in the book,
Jamie the man.
I'm recording myself saying these success tips, and I had like a nice tie or a nice shirt on the upper half of my body. Anyway, there were times when I wasn't wearing any pants, if I have to be honest.
Totally been there.
Hey, I thought we were in the trust tree here. What happened?
No, that's, to me, like there's that saying, right? You fake it till you make it. And I think there's a posture of moving forward with boldness, of knowing that you have what it takes. And there's like a humility behind that. But when the poser kind of wells up, it's like we almost convince ourselves, like OJ did during that trial. Like we become like this pathological person. Sorry, I have no opinion on the OJ thing, but it's like we can lie to ourselves. And I think that's, to me, that's the difference between being a poser, because I guess you're sharing a little bit about where your heart was. Like you were being a little bit inauthentic with who you were, but I saw you as like really wanting to have an impact on other guys and just trying some of these things that weren't authentic. I guess it's kind of cool to hear that you were actually being a poser. I thought you were just...
Man, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, Jamie, I just want to give you the opportunity to be authentic about your posing. I actually feel great after outing myself in all these areas. Remember that time when you called me? It was when you had first joined the 48 Days Mastermind.
Oh, boy.
You're surrounded by all these successful people, super successful financially anyway. You didn't really see the whole picture of who they were, but it was a pretty intimidating scene. And you called me up. And you were freaking out because you had to go there and stand up and tell everybody who you were and what you had accomplished and that whole thing. And take the story from there, man.
No, you identified, Michael, that I felt this pressure, which, it had nothing to do with the group giving me this pressure. It was all just in myself. I need to present myself in a way so that these people think I'm successful. I was not only freaking out, but I was trying to figure out how to do that. It didn't feel authentic. And you were just like, Jamie, you just have to be yourself. You've come so far. You're on this journey in a different spot. I mean, I remember there was one of the guys in the group who was a decamillionaire who had kind of lost his purpose because of selling a business. And I was worried about impressing these people. And because I was vulnerable about not feeling adequate in that group, some of these people that were actually the most successful financially started opening up about some of their insecurities, which what it was is they weren't insecure about having money or anything like that. It had to do more with their calling and their purpose. And so, I mean, that was really helpful. I remember being in the airport at Philadelphia, Michael, and I called you during the layover. You almost just like reset me. When you restart a computer and there's like programs that are glitching like my headspace wasn't good. And I was going to go into that group and just be this person that tried to explain, like, this is the business that I do. And instead, I was just a little bit, I don't think it was weak, actually. I was just like, I almost pointed out the elephant in the room. And a lot of people just resonated with that idea.
Jamie, I remember just reminding you of who you were and what was true and what I had seen. And it was super inspiring. And I thought that would really inspire the other people in the room, too. And isn't that how it is, though? When we look at ourselves, it's really hard to see all that. So I appreciate how you and Chris both do that for me and reminding me who I am and what they see and what's true.
It's so powerful to share those insecurities with one another. I mean, Jamie, just hearing you talk about that, I remember when I first started my online travel business, I had so much to that insecurity and I just felt like a fraud where, I'm starting this online business. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got a website. I've got like traffic coming in and I'm joining these, little online communities to try to help each other out and talking like I knew all this stuff that I barely just had scratched the surface of like SEO, but I'm trying to talk big. And I remember talking to these like internet marketer type circles and was just like, I hope they don't have any software to find out how few site visitors I really have, because like they're going to get on to me. I just kind of felt like a fraud in that, but I had to remember too, like, and we have to do this to ourselves. And it helps to have these friendships where we can literally call and help each other out, where we just say, you know what, but you have an online business. You have this, you have that, and you've made steps, you've made progress. Like, keep on going. You're not a failure, right?
Yeah, and being real with those people is actually, in my opinion, the way to really be accepted. Dan, like, I feel really bad. Last weekend, we had the mastermind meeting here in Franklin, and you guys weren't there. Dan Miller shared this story about this health club fail that he had, where he had this big health club and it went bankrupt, basically. And he was a member of, like, I think it was the Chamber of Commerce, but he went to this group that he was a part of, and he said, I'm a poser, that I went bankrupt, and that I can no longer be in this group. And they were like, you are so honest about your shortcoming. This gives you more credibility to actually be a part of our group, because now you had this life experience. Chris, my advice for you, if you called me up and you were freaking out, just like I did with Michael, if you were like, oh, these people are going to know who I am, be yourself, because people like you for who you are. Like we talked about last week, that Brian Tracy quote, everybody who's in the top 5% started in the bottom 5%. So let's just be real and own it, that we're on a journey. I think we're going to do better with people if we're just honest about that stuff.
No, that's good, Jamie. That reminds me of a story. About 15 years ago, I had the chance to meet Neil Armstrong. He came and spoke to our group in this political event that we had, and got to chat with him a few minutes before the speech, and then I listened to his speech, and I was early 20s here, okay, but this was an impressionable story that he shared that I'll never forget. He talked about how he was invited to this like weekend retreat with all these dignitaries. It was an exclusive group, like at the Biltmore or whatever, and there were these authors and speakers and inventors. And he remembers being in a hallway, listening to these world-class musicians entertain them, looking around the room, and he thought to himself, man, I don't belong here. Like, there are people that have done so many big things compared to me. And he said, all I did was just follow directions on where I was supposed to go. I'm like, dude, here's the guy who was the first person ever set foot on the moon, and he's feeling like he's a poser in this group of all these other amazing people too. I'm like, if the guy who walked on the moon can feel like a poser, then we're in pretty good company, right?
Yeah.
Happy to call myself a poser now. After that
story, Chris. That's the company that we have, right? But I mean, that brings us to point, number two here is that if people saw the real you, no one really respect you, right?
Oh,
is that true?
Man, let's bust that myth apart. Oh, man, what if we were laid bare in front of everybody, the real us? I got to be real with you guys. That's a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around. I'm not there. I'm not even close to that, actually, because I'm actually afraid that I would freak people out if they really knew the real me completely through and through. I don't know. How do you guys feel about that idea?
It's cool that we're on the journey together, but this reminds me of, remember last year when we started that group, what do we call it? Dr. Steve actually named it the Authenticity Group.
Yes.
And this was the anti-poser little mastermind.
There's 2 rules, right?
Share them, Michael.
Yeah. If you're not going to be there, let us know. And the second rule is no BS.
No posing.
That's it.
So the three of us on this call are 50% of that group. And these three other guys are, 10 years older than us. They're all millionaires. They all have been successful entrepreneurs for years. Two of them are like PhDs or doctors.
They're way smarter than we are, for sure.
Yeah, they're super smart. We came to this group. I remember inviting Michael and Chris into this group because Dr. Steve wanted to like have a smaller group. And it was intimidating. And then we got there and these older guys just led us. They were like, what did they say? This is a group where it's okay not to be okay. Mm-hmm. And so we come to that call and all that we do is just not be posers and talk about the things that we're struggling at the worst. And it is so stinking freeing to be a part of that.
It is, man. That's the myth, right? If people saw the real you feel like, oh man, they're not going to even want me in this club. And that reminds me of the story you just shared with Dan. He laid bare his finances on this chamber group where you think like everyone's got their stuff together and yet they're like, embrace them. And that's kind of the irony of this is that you're most respected when you're authentic, when you lay yourself bare, because guys, we're all fighting the same battles, aren't we, Jamie? Aren't we, Michael? I mean, we all fight and struggle each day, each week through this stuff. But when we're authentic with one another, that's where growth happens.
Yeah. I remember this time when I was a part of this amazing group of guys. It was called Man Alive, something I did with Jamie and my father and my brother. And I had the opportunity to share about some really deep stuff that I had gone through my past and things, some shame. I was working through some things and I was so freaked out about sharing that stuff because I thought, what are people going to think about me if they know this stuff about me? And the opposite of what I feared actually happened. I kind of just spilled my guts out there, and it was in the right atmosphere. It was all guys, and it was a supportive type of atmosphere. But afterwards, instead of feeling like alienated, I felt so much more connected to all the people there. And actually, people came up to me afterward and said, "Thank you for being real about that," because it gives me hope for my own situation, because I've struggled with that too. I had several people do that, and what I thought was going to alienate me actually connected me with people, and I still struggle to do that. I don't have this figured out, but I know that when I choose to do that, it really helps me.
Yes, Michael, I've been sharing with you guys about some of the stuff that I've been reading from Patrick Lencioni. And he talks about vulnerability-based trust, that when a leader in an organization, like that could be a father and a mother and a family, is that when we are real about how we feel, that trust and that vulnerability and that authenticity goes from the top to the bottom. But remember those teachers that would just never let in any information about their personal lives? They kept it all private. And you just felt like, yeah, they're good at the teacher, but there wasn't a connection. And then you had these other teachers that were just they just opened up themselves about their real life. They just let you look just a little bit behind the curtain of what was going on in real life. And then it just opens up something where you want to follow those people because they're just a real person. If we are these guys that are faking that we're somebody great, people smell that.
Boy, I remember my first career, you said not feeling real, right? Mm-hmm. In politics, where I spent my first 5-6 years, I began to feel out of place after a while, right? And you have to remember the context here. This is politicians who are 99% of them are the guys that shake your hand to meet you, and then the rest of the conversation, they're looking over their shoulder, seeing who else is in the room they can meet, and you're supposed to be having a conversation with them, right? This is politics, guys. But I just remember when I finally owned the fact that, you know what, this is not my arena. I'm living someone else's dream. I'm a loose suit, just like most of these people in here, playing the part. That when I finally was like, I'm done, and I shared that with some of my mentors, my board of directors and stuff. It was freeing. It was also scary, not knowing what the next step was. But I remember people coming up to me after the fact saying, "So what's your plan? Like, you got all this stuff, right? And everything's lined up." And I'm like, "Actually, no, I don't. But I'm just going to figure it out." And I'm owning the fact that I am going to lean into this unknown. And how there were a couple conversations where people said, "Wow, good for you for taking that step," because I couldn't do it. You had your trajectory that was already planned for you. but you own the fact that this isn't you. Now, that was a hard step, though. And I didn't have guys like you in my life to encourage me or help me along. It was a journey for sure.
Awesome,
man. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. That's deep, man. In a world of professional posers, you realize that you didn't want to be one. That's awesome.
That they call politics is Hollywood for ugly people. So
I've never heard that before.
Oh my gosh. I'd love to get our mentor's perspective on this subject. I know he has a lot to offer in this area. So let's go ahead and cue up the McCluskey mentor moment.
All right. Like most things in life, I think it's actually one of those things that's not an all or nothing thing. As you guys emphasized, we are all posers. We all do pose. And I'm going to suggest that posing is part of becoming, which is ultimately the challenge of life. We come into the world knit together by our father and our mother's wombs, but we didn't come with a blueprint. We don't know what he knit in there. We just know that he knit it. He put us together. His gifts and his calling are irrevocable, but we're going to discover those things that are in there throughout the whole of our life. And when we're little kids, we borrow a lot of what we come to believe about what's in us. Who am I? From our parents or from coaches or key people in our lives, teachers and such. But when we hit adolescence, which is where a lot of your metaphors of posing really came in, you're walking the halls of the school or whatever your surroundings are, and you've got the jocks and you've got the nerds and you've got the brains and you've got the chess club people or the band people or whatever group. Everybody's got their own, not only group they hang with, they have their own way of dressing. Sometimes their own way of doing their hair, their own internal slang, their own speak and all. You have a culture that goes with various ways of being, and we seek to fit in, so you become a poser to fit in. But here's my point. What we're actually doing is experimenting. We're trying to discover, well, who am I really? I don't know. I didn't get instructions for that. So I'm trying to discover it by vicariously borrowing from other people, just like I've been borrowing from dad and from mom and from these other key people, except now it's a very unpredictable, very volatile peer group, right? And I always say you can always tell the nonconformists because they all look alike. They all look alike. Everybody's posing. Everybody's trying stuff on. And because that's necessary, Jamie, I think it was you who hit on one of the key themes then that needs to be our mantra is as we experiment, as we seek to discover and try on new selves, we have to stay real. If you will go into those spaces being, first of all, real with yourself, not actually telling yourself a lie and believing that maybe you are or whatever, but instead just asking the question, am I? Could I be? Is there something inside of me that might express itself in these ways? Then we go in listening in a very real, vulnerable place with ourselves and with God and taking cues from others whose opinions we actually value, who are maybe worthy of being valued, and we discover more of who we are. Stay real with yourself, with God, and with others in settings. And then, sure, we're all going to do some amount of borrowing from each other.
Man, Chris, thanks for that. That's deep, man, because that gets to truly the heart of insecurities is we're looking at ourselves, we're looking at others for acceptance, and I'm so guilty of this day in, day out. I mean, let's just be frank. Even in this EFM lifestyle that we're trying to live and we're bringing other guys along on this journey, if I'm being very frank with you guys right now and myself, there are days, there are moments, probably yesterday, this morning, when I didn't feel like a very good dad. I didn't feel like a very good husband. And so sometimes I even feel that imposter syndrome right here. But this is part of the journey is saying we have to remember that we're loved by God. He created us for a purpose, for a plan. And we just have to rest in that because sometimes we get so distracted with all the exterior stuff around us, right? Other people's acceptance. How do you guys deal with that?
I love this point, Chris. You know how when you meet up with other guys, the question everybody asks is, what do you do? I'm just kind of sick of that question. Like people are so much more than, like we know, like we're so much more than what we do. And I wish that it was culturally acceptable for us to talk about who we really are. It goes back to the posing thing, right? It's like we get value, we get self-worth in feeling like we're doing a good job with something. And the fact is we should be more comfortable in our own skin, like appreciating who God made us to be and what we're all about. And that's, I guess it's just countercultural to not be a poser. So we're leaning into something here that's a little bit tricky.
Man, if we knew through and through that we were loved and accepted, man, I just wouldn't need to look for that anywhere. I wouldn't need to seek it in any environment, whether I felt like people were more successful around me or not. I would just be me and be happy about that. And that's the journey for me and for a lot of guys, is understanding really how to accept that love and to rest in it and live in it and let that fill you, rather than the empty words of people who oftentimes you don't even know or aren't even really connected to.
Michael, that's why the coaching that you gave me was so powerful when I was in the airport at Philadelphia. If you would have sent me that clip to the Bob Newhart video and just like said, stop it, like don't do that. We need to pause and ask ourselves what is really going on here. And like, we know the answer, that we're loved and accepted, but we need to remind it to each other. We need to be communicating that to our kids. Chris, you had a cool little story about what you did with Jesse that really touched me. Like, do you mind sharing that real quick?
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to bring up, and I've repeated this, in our family, but my friend and pastor here has this quote, and it's worth sharing. But sometimes we just have to remind ourselves that we need to enjoy the joy of being enjoyed by God.
Ooh.
Which is powerful, to enjoy the joy of being enjoyed by God. Like, that's where we just got to rest, is just remind ourselves every day, like, this is where I start my day. And so, Jamie, you mentioned this story. This literally just happened like on Monday, but
Real time.
Without getting all the details, my oldest son, Jesse, was having a tough time. There was this birthday party thing that happened the day before, and kids and preferences of who liked what and everything. And he was just being a tough boy that morning. Right. And we kind of dug down into some stuff, and I brought him into my office, and for about an hour, I had him write down, and we developed this daily affirmation that he could read to himself and keeps at his desk now, that he could say to himself. And if you've never heard of this app, it's a great app called Think Up. Go to Think Up at the iTunes store, whatever. But you can speak into daily affirmations, these promises, these declarations, truths that are found in scriptures about what God thinks about us. And guys, he put that together. We wrote it out, and then he recorded it in his own voice. We put some little, dramatic music behind it. And I remember when he recorded it, and then we played it back, and he heard himself talk through this, speaking to himself. He just got a little teary-eyed. Was like, okay, this is what I need to remember. It's not about the acceptance from my friend. It's not that they didn't like my gift that I brought. It's not that, I get in trouble here and there. It's God loves me. Yeah. And I have strength, and the joy of the Lord is my strength. And he just kind of went through this stuff, but man, it was powerful.
Love that, Chris.
Man.
So that's something that we can do here in terms of a call to action, is to really take a look at how do you start your day? How do you frame your day? How do you frame your times when you get down on yourself, when you are seeking to pose? Remind yourself. I love what Michael just shared in that question. Am I loved by God? Absolutely you are. Maybe you need to create your own daily affirmations, your own declarations of how you can start.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Visit efmlife.com to connect with us and others like you who are pursuing success in enterprise, family, and marriage.